Hey guys, tonight we drift somewhere warm, somewhere shimmering, a little crescent of land off the East African coast where the air itself seems to hum with memory. You can almost smell it already, can't you? That humid swirl of salt, smoke, and something faintly sweet, like a bakery that forgot it's in the tropics. You probably won't survive this one without feeling a little hungry or maybe just hypnotized. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is where you are. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together.
Morning leaks into the sky like honey down glass. You wake to the sound of roosters and the hiss of boiling water somewhere nearby. The air is already thick with fragrance, nutmeg, pepper, and that unmistakable sweetness of drying cloves that seems to live in every fold of Zanzibar's skin. You trudge along a path that winds through rows of clove trees. Their trunks twist like dancers frozen mid-step, bark peeling in lazy curls, leaves glistening under dew. When the breeze stirs, it's as if someone's opened a giant spice jar above you. A farmer waves you over. His hands are stained with resin, his grin missing more teeth than it keeps. "Gariba," he says, "welcome," and presses a clove bud into your palm. "Pick before the flower opens," he explains, "or you get nothing but regret and mosquitoes." His chuckle rattles like dry pods. He plucks another bud and crushes it between his fingers, releasing a sharp scent that cuts through the humid air. You can taste it in the back of your throat, sweet at first, then fiery. Cloves, he tells you, are the heartbeat of this island. They once made Zanzibar the richest piece of coral rock in the world. You wander with him as he works, the rhythmic snap of clove buds echoing through the plantation. Each tree carries hundreds of tiny spikes that glint like rusted gold in the sunlight. The buds fall into woven baskets, destined for drying racks and then, centuries ago, for markets that stretched from London to Bombay. The smell makes you dizzy, almost high. You joke that if perfume companies sold Zanzibar morning as a scent, you'd buy it in bulk. He nods solemnly and says, "People already do." By the 19th century, Zanzibar had become the clove capital of the world. Arab settlers from Oman, especially under Sultan Sayyid, turned the island into a vast plantation network, using enslaved Africans for labor. It's easy to forget that this sweet-smelling crop was once rooted in blood and sweat. You pause beneath a tree, watching a young boy scramble up the trunk with a small knife clenched between his teeth. He moves with practiced grace, slicing clusters of buds and dropping them into a basket. You ask if he's scared of falling. "Only if the wind forgets me," he says, not looking down. Historians still argue whether the Omani sultans truly improved life for locals or simply replaced one master with another. What's certain is that the clove turned Zanzibar from a sleepy island into a global obsession, a place where scent became currency. As the day burns hotter, the farmer leads you toward the drying fields. Hundreds of mats are spread across open ground, each covered in cloves that darken from green to deep brown under the sun. It's oddly mesmerizing, the island's fortune literally baking in the heat. You crouch, take a handful, and let them run through your fingers. The sound they make is delicate, like whispering sand. He tells you it takes 4 days to dry them properly. Any less and they mold, any more and they lose their soul. Cloves are like people, he says, half smiling. They spoil if ignored. A group of women walks past, balancing baskets on their heads, laughing about something you can't quite catch. The farmer says they're gossiping about whose husband snores loudest. You tell him you snore like a small earthquake. He pats your shoulder sympathetically and says, "Then you'll never need a drum for music." In the shade of a mango tree, he offers you coconut water, the shell hacked open with a practiced swing of his machete. It's cool and sweet, a brief reprieve from the spice-laden air. He tells you a local saying, "The clove tree listens to secrets." People believe that if you whisper your wish to its roots, the next harvest will carry it to the sea. Quirky, yes, but you find yourself tempted to try. You kneel, mumble something about better Wi-Fi and fewer mosquitoes, and pretend not to see his grin. As you walk again, the path leads to a low hill overlooking the ocean. From up here, the entire island seems perfumed. Ships once anchored below, their sails full of monsoon wind, their hulls loaded with sacks of dried buds bound for faraway ports. The smell alone could announce Zanzibar before the horizon did. You imagine those ships creaking with the weight of spice and ambition. Sailors joked that they could tell they were near Zanzibar when even their socks started to smell expensive.
Not exactly poetic, but accurate. You sit for a while, letting the wind roll over you. The scent of cloves is almost too much now, intoxicating, insistent, ancient. You realize that every empire that touched this island came for that smell, and yet the trees remain, quietly generous, their roots gripping coral rock like memory itself. The farmer tells you his grandfather used to say that cloves have moods. If you harvest them too soon, they sulk. If you praise them, they bloom brighter. You must talk to them kindly, he insists, half joking. You tell him you barely managed to keep a cactus alive. He nods gravely, then maybe start by apologizing to it. You laugh, but there's something haunting about his tone. This place makes you feel small in a comforting way, as if the island's pulse predates all your worries. By late afternoon, smoke rises from a nearby hut where cloves are being sorted and packed. A young woman tosses handfuls into a sifter, humming under her breath. The tune is low, cyclical, soothing. You ask what she's singing. She says it's a lullaby for the sea. You ask if the sea needs to sleep. Of course, she says, otherwise it dreams too loud. The sun melts into the horizon. The scent of cloves deepens, becoming darker, smokier. You watch bats begin to flicker between the trees, their wings slicing the last gold from the sky. Somewhere a muezzin's call ripples through the air, soft and haunting. You realize you've spent the entire day inhaling history. Every breath has carried centuries of trade, greed, beauty, and pain. The farmer waves goodbye, his figure framed by a halo of twilight dust. Tomorrow, you'll see where the sultans kept their gold, he calls out. You nod, though you already suspect the real treasure of Zanzibar isn't locked in any palace. It's here, in the soil, in the scent, in the stubborn heartbeat of these trees that turned wind into wealth. The night folds around you again, thick and sweet. Somewhere in the darkness, a clove bud cracks as it dries, releasing another puff of scent into the air. You breathe it in like a promise.
The morning hums with lazy confidence, the kind only a city like Stone Town can pull off. You follow the call of seagulls and spice carts until the narrow coral stone lanes swallow you whole. The streets twist like spilled ribbon, just wide enough for one donkey, one dream, and one impatient tourist trying not to get lost. The air here isn't merely warm, it's aromatic chaos. Clove, cardamom, sandalwood, and something smoky you can't quite name. Maybe ambition. Maybe yesterday's grilled octopus. A woman in a bright kanga cloth glides past you, her perfume blending with the spice dust that hangs like mist. You turn a corner, and there it is, Stone Town, alive, cracked, beautiful, and older than your sense of direction. You trail your hand along coral rag walls that have seen 1,000 seasons of trade. Wooden doors carved with verses and warnings line the alleys like ancient storytellers. You pause before one inlaid with brass studs, gleaming like constellations against the dark teak. Someone tells you those studs weren't for decoration. They once served to ward off war elephants in India. Historians still argue whether Zanzibar ever needed to stop elephants, your guide adds dryly. We didn't have any, but style is forever. The laugh you share echoes between the walls, swallowed quickly by the city's rhythm. Stone Town is a mosaic of worlds. Omani balconies lean over Indian shutters. Portuguese fort walls sulk beside Arab courtyards. Each layer whispers a different accent. The Omani sultans, especially Saeed bin Sultan, carved their paradise here in the 19th century, moving the capital of their empire from Muscat to Zanzibar. You can almost imagine the royal fleet sailing across the Indian Ocean, trailing the scent of cloves and political intent. You wander toward the old palace complex, the Beit al-Sahel, the House of the Coast. It looms pale against the turquoise sky, its arches graceful but heavy with stories. The Sultan ruled not with swords, but with spice, diplomacy, and enough gold to make a pirate weep. Inside, faded murals still cling to plaster, showing ships and swirling vines. The marble floors echo your steps like soft applause. Somewhere behind those walls, the Sultan's court once dined on rice scented with saffron, sweetened with dates from Oman, and sprinkled with cinnamon from their own plantations. Spice wasn't just profit, it was prestige. Your guide leans in and whispers, "They say the Sultan's favorite room smelled like clove oil and sea spray." You can almost believe it. Even now, the air seems perfumed with memory. Out on the balcony, the harbor glitters below, filled with dhows rocking lazily in the tide. You spot one being loaded with sacks of cloves, tiny brown universes of wealth, each bud weighed like gold. The Sultans didn't just sell spice, they engineered it. Said ordered systematic planting across the islands, turning entire landscapes into botanical treasuries. At the height of his reign, Zanzibar exported nearly 90% of the world's cloves. That's not just trade, that's scent-based domination. But empire, like nutmeg, can be intoxicating and volatile. Beneath the polished courtyards, the real labor happened far from sight. You'll see that shadow soon enough. For now, the city hums in prosperity. You wander into the bazaar, Daryanti Market, and instantly question your sense of smell's survival. Every stall is a sensory ambush. Clove dust stings your nostrils. Piles of turmeric glow like molten gold. Cinnamon curls rest beside bundles of vanilla, so fragrant you forget your name for a second. A vendor waves a packet of cardamom under your nose and declares it better than heartbreak. You buy some on principle. Another man sells tiny bottles of amber oil, swearing it cures boredom, mosquitoes, and bad boyfriends. You're tempted to test that last claim on someone. Amid the chaos, an elderly spice merchant beckons you closer. His fingers, stained dark from decades of handling cloves, tremble slightly as he opens a wooden chest. Inside, a layer of fine dust, the kind that glows red in sunlight. He tells you it's spiced gold, the powdered remains of the finest harvest from a century ago. He says still smells alive. You lean in, and yes, it does. Sweet, sharp, eternal. He chuckles. You can destroy kingdoms, but not scent. Outside, Stone Town's pulse beats stronger as the day warms. You follow the sound of bells, tiny, delicate, coming from the harbor. A procession of traders unloads baskets of ginger and pepper, their chatter a mix of Swahili, Arabic, and Hindi. This city was built not just on clothes, but on conversation. Thousands of deals sealed with sweat, salt, and shared tea. You pause for coffee, Zanzibari kahuna, thick as molasses, laced with cardamom and served in a cup that feels too hot for logic. The man beside you explains that it's impolite to refuse a refill, even if your heart is already vibrating like a drum. You nod weakly as he pours another. He says, "People come for spice, but they stay for the stories." He points toward the harbor, where gulls wheel above the tide. You spot one being loaded with sacks of cloves, tiny brown universes of wealth. Each bud weighed like gold. The Sultans didn't just sell spice, they engineered it. Said ordered systematic planting across the islands, turning entire landscapes into botanical treasuries. At the height of his reign, Zanzibar exported nearly 90% of the world's cloves. That's not just trade, that's scent-based domination. But empire, like nutmeg, can be intoxicating and volatile. Beneath the polished courtyards, the real labor happened far from sight. You'll see that shadow soon enough. For now, the city hums in prosperity. You wander into the bazaar, Daryanti Market, and instantly question your sense of smell's survival. Every stall is a sensory ambush. Clove dust stings your nostrils. Piles of turmeric glow like molten gold. Cinnamon curls rest beside bundles of vanilla so fragrant you forget your name for a second. A vendor waves a packet of cardamom under your nose and declares it better than heartbreak. You buy some on principle. Another man sells tiny bottles of amber oil, swearing it cures boredom, mosquitoes, and bad boyfriends. You're tempted to test that last claim on someone. Amid the chaos, an elderly spice merchant beckons you closer. His fingers, stained dark from decades of handling cloves, tremble slightly as he opens a wooden chest. Inside, a layer of fine dust, the kind that glows red in sunlight. He tells you it's spiced gold, the powdered remains of the finest harvest from a century ago. He says, "Still smells alive." You lean in, and yes, it does. Sweet, sharp, eternal. He chuckles. You can destroy kingdoms, but not scent. Outside, Stone Town's pulse beats stronger as the day warms. You follow the sound of bells, tiny, delicate, coming from the harbor. A procession of traders unloads baskets of ginger and pepper, their chatter a mix of Swahili, Arabic, and Hindi. This city was built not just on cloves, but on conversation. Thousands of deals sealed with sweat, salt, and shared tea. You pause for coffee, Zanzibari kahuna, thick as molasses, laced with cardamom and served in a cup that feels too hot for logic. The man beside you explains that it's impolite to refuse a refill, even if your heart is already vibrating like a drum. You nod weakly as he pours another. He says, "People come for spice, but they stay for the stories." He points toward the harbor, where gulls wheel above the tide. You spot one being loaded with sacks of cloves, tiny brown universes of wealth. Each bud weighed like gold. The sultans didn't just sell spice, they engineered it. Said ordered systematic planting across the islands, turning entire landscapes into botanical treasuries. At the height of his reign, Zanzibar exported nearly 90% of the world's cloves. That's not just trade, that's scent-based domination. But empire, like nutmeg, can be intoxicating and volatile. Beneath the polished courtyards, the real labor happened far from sight. You'll see that shadow soon enough. For now, the city hums in prosperity. You wander into the bazaar, Duriani Market, and instantly question your sense of smell survival. Every stall is a sensory ambush. Clove dust stings your nostrils. Piles of turmeric glow like molten gold. Cinnamon curls rest beside bundles of vanilla, so fragrant you forget your name for a second. A vendor waves a packet of cardamom under your nose and declares it better than heartbreak. You buy some on principle.
The sweetness begins to curdle. You can feel it the next morning, walking past the edge of Stone Town, where the perfume of spice fades and something heavier lingers beneath. The weight of what paid for all that fragrance. You follow a trail of voices toward an old building marked by carved coral stone, half eaten by salt and time. It's quiet here, too quiet. The sea breeze carries a faint chill even in the heat. You step inside, and the air thickens, cool, still, trapped between stone walls that remember too much. This was the old slave market, once the largest in East Africa. The irony hits you like humidity, that paradise could hold a place so hellish, hidden behind a veil of cloves and commerce. Your footsteps echo down a narrow passage until you reach a low-ceilinged chamber. It's smaller than you imagined. 2 rooms carved from coral, dim and damp, with only a slit of light filtering from above. The guide, a soft-spoken man with eyes like wet ash, tells you that up to 70 men and women were crammed into this space at a time. 70. You look at the walls, at the chain rings still bolted in place,
and can't imagine how. Historians still argue whether this exact room was used for holding slaves, he admits, but the trade itself, there's no question. He runs his hand over the stone, rough and cool. These walls don't lie. You close your eyes and the silence roars. You can almost hear the muffled breaths, the coughs, the scrape of metal against skin. Above ground, merchants haggled over prices in the market square. Below, human beings waited to be sold, sometimes for less than a bag of spice. A bitter joke forms in your throat. 2 cloves could buy a life. You swallow it. It's not funny here. The guide leads you out into the courtyard, where a church now stands. The Anglican Cathedral of Christchurch, built deliberately over the old slave market in 1879 as both a memorial and a message. The trade ends here. You stand under its vaulted ceiling, sunlight pouring through stained glass, and notice that the altar sits exactly where the whipping post once stood. The symbolism is as heavy as the air. You trace your hand over a marble plaque that lists names, some real, most lost. The guide points out a small brass plate at your feet. In memory of those whose voices were silenced, but whose spirits endure. The words feel like incense, hanging but never dissipating. Outside, near the cathedral gates, a bronze sculpture shows 5 figures chained together, their faces carved with eerie calm. You kneel to look closer, and a stray cat slips between the statues, rubbing against a figure's leg. For a moment, life and loss blur. The cat purrs, indifferent to history's weight. Your guide sighs. He says, "People come here for spice and leave remembering blood." You nod, though the lump in your throat makes it hard to answer. The truth is, Zanzibar's spice wealth was built on enslaved labor. Tens of thousands were captured from mainland Africa, Mozambique, Congo, Tanzania, and brought here to work on the clove plantations. Many never left the island. Others were shipped onward, traded for textiles, firearms, and European silver. You walk toward the old port where the slave ships once waited, their holds perfumed with cloves to disguise the stench of despair. It's one of history's darkest ironies that the same scent used to sweeten the world once masked its cruelty. At the docks, an old fisherman sits mending a net, his fingers nimble despite the years. He looks up and gestures toward the horizon. That sea, he says, remembers everything. It hides, but it never forgets. He tells you that locals still believe the spirits of those taken across the water return on moonless nights, riding the waves like mist. If you listen closely, he says, you might hear singing, a sound soft as breathing, carried on the tide. You listen. You hear only gulls, but for a second you believe him anyway. He grins faintly. He says, we still tell their stories, otherwise the island loses its heartbeat. There's a small museum nearby, tucked behind a crumbling archway. Inside, a display case holds rusted shackles and wooden tags used to mark captives. The handwriting is elegant, detached, as if accounting for spices, not souls. Another exhibit shows an 1840 ship manifest listing goods exported to Oman, cloves, ivory, and 32 servants. You can almost smell the ink. Historians note that Sultan Bangash, Said Said's successor, officially outlawed the slave trade in 1873 under British pressure. But unofficially, it continued for decades, hidden in dhows that sailed by night. The empire that cloves built refused to admit its own rot. As you leave the museum, the air outside feels sharper, brighter,
as if the island itself exhales when you emerge. But the scent of cloves is back on the breeze, familiar, yet changed. Now it carries weight. You walk aimlessly through the alleys, the laughter of children playing soccer bouncing off coral walls. Life goes on, defiantly. You buy a small paper cone of roasted cashews from a street vendor who swears they cure heartbreak. You smile weakly and ask if they work. He shrugs, only if you share them. So you do, handing him a few as thanks. Later, as the sun melts into the sea, you find yourself standing on the beach again, watching the horizon burn orange. The same waters that once carried ships of bondage now glitter under the weight of kites and fishermen. I wonder if the ocean feels remorse or renewal. Maybe both. The breeze shifts, bringing with it that same intoxicating perfume, the mingling of clove and salt. It's beautiful. It's unbearable. It's everything at once. And for the first time, you realize how easily scent can lie, how it can seduce, conceal, and comfort all at once. The island knows this truth too well. You close your eyes and breathe deeply anyway, because that's what you came here to do, to smell the past, no matter how much it stings. The waves keep rolling. Somewhere behind you, a muessin's call floats through the dusk, tender and haunting, like an apology whispered too late. The dawn arrives softer this time, almost hesitant, as if the island itself needs a moment to recover. You wake to the rhythmic clang of a church bell mingling with the distant call to prayer, two voices rising from the same humid morning. The harmony feels accidental and inevitable at once, faiths stitched together by salt air and survival. You follow the sound toward the heart of Stone Town again, where the city wakes like an old lion, slow, proud, and full of stories it refuses to tell all at once. The narrow lanes smell of fried dough and nutmeg. Children weave through bicycles, carrying school books and chunks of sugarcane. You pass a missionary house painted white, the walls faded by monsoon rains. A carved wooden sign above the door reads, House of Hope, 1877. Inside, time feels layered like spice dust, sweet, bitter, sacred. A woman in a blue shawl greets you, her smile patient. "We were teachers once," she says. "Now we're storytellers." She leads you down a hallway lined with photographs, stern missionaries, curious local students, a few smiling faces that look defiantly into the camera as if to say, "We know what you're doing here, but we'll learn anyway." She tells you how, after the abolition of the slave trade, Christian and Islamic missions competed, sometimes gently, sometimes not, for the island's soul. Both offered education, medicine, and faith. Both built schools, hospitals, and churches. And both, in their own ways, tried to rewrite Zanzibar's story. Historians still argue whether the missionaries saved or replaced the culture, she says. Perhaps both are true. You step out into a small courtyard where a mango tree grows beside a well. She plucks a fruit, slices it open with a practiced flick, and offers you a piece. The sweetness runs down your wrist. "That's Zanzibar," she says with a wink. "Always a little messy, but worth the taste." You thank her, pocketing the seed like a relic, and continue down the street toward the Farahani Gardens, where the morning market is in full swing. Smoke from charcoal grills curls into the sky, mixing with the tang of ocean and clothes. Fishermen unload their catches, while vendors shout prices like they're conducting an orchestra. You buy a skewer of octopus brushed with lime and chili. The flavor is electric, the heat biting back. A man beside you stirring sugarcane juice laughs at your coughing. "Too spicy?" he teases. You wheeze out, no, just emotional." He grins. "Good. Spice should make you feel something." Everywhere you look, life pulses with color. Women sell woven baskets dyed with turmeric and hibiscus. Old men play bow under the shade of tamarind trees, moving shells with the seriousness of diplomats. A child runs past, clutching a bouquet of cinnamon sticks like flowers. You start to realize that spice isn't just commerce here. It's language, identity, even memory. A few steps away, you find the old dispensary, a colonial-era building with teal balconies and lace-like woodwork. It was once a hospital for the poor, built by an Indian merchant in the 1880s. Its architecture, half Arabian, half Victorian, and entirely gorgeous, seems to hold the contradictions of the island in one breath. A local guide named Yusuf meets you there. His voice is warm, lilting, and touched with mischief. "Zanzibar is a blend," he says. "Arab bones, African heart, Indian blood, European perfume." You tell him it sounds like a complicated relationship. He laughs. "Exactly. That's why we're never bored." He leads you through narrow alleys where the sound of prayer fades into church bells again. Along the way, he stops to show you a door engraved with Quranic verses beside another bearing a Latin cross. "Neighbors," he says. "They argued, they traded, they borrowed sugar from each other. That's how islands survive." You pause to watch a group of women weaving palm leaves into mats. One hums a ta'arab melody, another joins in harmony. Yusuf lowers his voice. "You hear that? That's faith, too. Not in God, maybe, but in rhythm, in community." He tells you that when missionaries came, they brought hymns, but the locals already had music, so they mixed them. Today, Zanzibar's spiritual songs blend gospel chords with Swahili verses, African drums with Arabic scales. It's messy, yes, but deeply alive. You follow Yusuf toward the outskirts, where the city gives way to fields again. The smell of cloves is fainter here, replaced by that of burning coconut husks. You find a small mission school, still standing, still teaching. Children's laughter spills from open windows like sunlight. Inside, a teacher writes English words on a chalkboard beside Swahili ones. Friend, Rafiki, home, numbing, spice, kiungo. You smile. The words feel simple, but they carry centuries of blending. Languages and lives colliding in small classrooms under big skies. Outside, the teacher joins you, wiping chalk dust from her fingers. She tells you she's the great-granddaughter of one of the first students taught by British missionaries. "My grandmother said the priests taught her to write, but the Quran teacher taught her to think." You laugh softly. "And what do you teach?" She tilts her head. "Balance." The word hangs between you, heavy and perfect. You linger until the afternoon light grows syrupy. Children wave goodbye, shouting your name as though you're part of the story now too. Maybe you are. On the walk back, the streets shimmer with heat. You stop by a spice stall, unable to resist. The vendor scoops out a blend he calls Zanzibar Mix. Cloves, cinnamon, cardamom, black pepper, and a pinch of something he refuses to name. "Secret ingredient," he grins. "Probably nostalgia." You sniff it. It smells like everything you've seen so far. Sweat, laughter, history, forgiveness. You buy a bag, not because you cook with it, because it feels like carrying the island in your pocket. As the day cools, you wander back toward the shore. The evening breeze carries both hymns and calls to prayer, tangled and indistinguishable. Lanterns flicker to life across the promenade. The smell of clove tea and cassava wraps around you like a blanket. You realize that faith here isn't about boundaries. It's about blending, about coexistence in a place where sweetness and suffering once grew side by side. Somewhere behind you, the church bell rings again, answered by the muezzin. The island hums, united in rhythm, if not in doctrine. And as you stand by the sea, sipping spiced tea that burns your tongue just right, you think maybe that's what salvation really smells like. Warm, complex, impossible to separate into parts.
The world starts to move faster, and so does Zanzibar. You feel it one morning in the hum of machinery, foreign, heavy, certain of its purpose. Steamships now cut through the same waters that once belonged to monsoon sails, their iron bellies groaning like impatient beasts. The old rhythm, the seasonal breath of wind and waiting, is gone. The spice winds are changing. You stand on the harbor wall, watching one such ship unload crates marked London and Hamburg. The dock workers move briskly, dressed in a mix of khaki and confusion. Everything smells different now. Coal smoke, tar, and the faint ghost of cloves trying not to disappear. A gray-bearded merchant beside you mutters, "The sea's too noisy these days." You nod. Steam engines roar where dhows once whispered. It feels like someone has swapped poetry for paperwork. The late 19th century has arrived, and with it the colonial powers, Britain, Germany, Portugal, France, all circling like sharks in spiced water. The Sultan's clove empire, once perfumed and proud, begins to tremble under the weight of new treaties and taxes. You walk through Stone Town, past the familiar carved doors, now adorned with brass plaques bearing company names instead of verses. There's a telegram office where a coffee stall used to be, and the first bicycles rattle awkwardly over coral cobblestones. Modernity smells faintly of oil and ambition. In the palace courtyard, an interpreter explains that Sultan Hamoud, grandson of Said, has signed an agreement with the British. Protectorate, the interpreter says, as if it's a kind word. They protect us from ourselves. You raise an eyebrow. He shrugs. It's better than war, for now. Historians still argue whether the British presence preserved Zanzibar's legacy or gutted its sovereignty. But standing here, watching a Union Jack ripple beside the Sultan's flag, it's clear who's steering the ship now. You wander into the customs warehouse where spices are weighed, stamped, and logged in ledgers the size of tombstones. The clerk, a thin man with spectacles and a suspiciously cheerful accent, explains that the global market has changed. Cloves, once the island's golden currency, now face competition from Dutch and French plantations in the Pacific. Globalization, he says, pronouncing it like a curse wrapped in silk. He offers you a whiff of a new batch, dried perfectly, still aromatic, but somehow the scent feels diminished, not weaker, just lonelier. You realize you're smelling decline disguised as continuity. Outside, the streets buzz with talk of progress. There's electricity now, flickering lamps strung between palm trees. There are schools teaching English and accounting. There's even a newspaper printed once a week, carrying articles about Zanzibar's bright future. You pick one up and find an editorial praising the efficiency of British oversight. Below it, an advertisement for clothes cigarettes, the fragrance of empire. You cough, half at the irony, half at the smoke curling from a passerby's hand. At the harbor, you meet a woman named Asha, who runs a small spice stall inherited from her grandmother. Her fingers move fast, sorting nutmeg from cardamom with military precision. You ask how business is. She sighs, eyes on the sea. "The world doesn't need our scent anymore," she says. "Now they have machines that can make anything smell like anything." You ask what she'll do. She grins, sells stories instead. She unwraps a packet of cloves and tells you a legend her grandmother used to whisper, that the trees once grew on the moon, and when the gods got tired of its perfume, they flung them down to earth. That's why cloves never forget where they came from, she says. They still reach for the sky. You buy a handful, more out of loyalty than need. A few streets away, a group of children chase after a bicycle, laughing wildly. Their laughter echoes against the coral walls, bright and untamed, and for a moment you can almost believe the island will be fine. But then the bells ring. The Royal Navy has anchored offshore, and rumor spreads fast. Zanzibar is now officially under British rule. The 1896 Anglo-Zanzibar War, if it can be called that, lasts all of 38 minutes, still the shortest war in history. The Sultan's palace burns, and the clove-scented air fills with smoke and panic. You picture the old wooden doors blackened, their brass studs gleaming dully through soot. Somewhere in the chaos, a spice totem collapses, releasing a perfume so strong that sailors later claimed they could smell Zanzibar from 20 miles out. Quirky, but true. That battle ended before most people finished their morning tea. The new sultan, chosen by the British, swears allegiance with a trembling hand. The empire continues, but it smells different now, antiseptic and disciplined. You walk along the shoreline that night, the surf glowing faintly under the moon. The dhows still float there, their sails furled like folded prayers. Asha's voice echoes in your mind, sells stories instead. You whisper it to the waves, just to see if they'll carry it somewhere. The next day you travel inland again, curious and restless. The plantations remain, endless rows of clove trees, quiet as soldiers. But the people working them now are paid wages instead of being chained, and yet the rhythm hasn't changed much. You speak to an overseer who shrugs when you ask about the difference. He says, freedom is expensive, but at least it smells the same. You stay until evening, when the sun slants low and paints everything gold. The clove buds shimmer like embers, and the air feels heavy with nostalgia. You pick one and crush it between your fingers. The scent rises, sweet, sharp, stubbornly alive. It hits you then, the spice doesn't care who rules the island. It keeps growing, flowering, and perfuming the air just the same. Empires come and go, cloves remain. Back in town, you find Asha again, sitting by her stall humming. She's stringing cloves into necklaces for tourists, souvenirs of scent, she calls them. You buy one and slip it over your head. The smell follows you as you walk through the darkening streets, mingling with the hiss of steamships and the creak of dhows. Change is here to stay, but the island still breathes in rhythm, part human, part spice, part ghost. As night deepens, thunder rumbles over the ocean. The monsoon season is near again, and you imagine the winds returning, carrying the last whispers of the old world away. Somewhere behind you, the bells of the cathedral ring once and stop. The sound hangs in the humid air, unanswered but not forgotten, like the scent of cloves that refuses to fade, even as smoke and steam claim the sky. You wake to rain. The kind that softens edges and makes the air smell like the past has been freshly washed. The streets of Stone Town glisten, coral walls glistening with slick trails where vines cling like old handwriting. Somewhere, a rooster protests the weather, and somewhere else, someone sings an old Swahili lullaby about spices that grow faster when you whisper to them. You walk through the puddles barefoot, because why not? And the rain feels warm, familiar. The century has turned now. It's the early 1900s. The colonial flags are still fluttering, the empire's grip steady, but something beneath it all hums, a quiet restlessness, like the roots of the spice trees stirring underground. The plantations are still here, but fewer people live entirely by the clove. Rubber, sisal, and copra have joined the export lists. The island is diversifying, reluctantly. The scent of progress is mixed with mud and machinery. You travel inland to visit a plantation run by an elderly man named Hassan. His family has grown cloves for 5 generations. He greets you with a handshake rough as bark and eyes full of stories.
He leads you among the trees, their trunks gray and mottled, their leaves glistening with rain. You stop as he plucks a clove bud from a branch, rolls it between his palms, and says, "You can tell the strength of the tree by how loudly the bud laughs when crushed." He demonstrates. Snap! And the smell bursts out, bold and confident. You laugh, though you can't decide if the joke is about cloves or people. Historians still argue whether the British improved the spice trade. Hassan says as he guides you between rows. They built roads and warehouses, yes, but they also built rules. Too many rules. He tells you how colonial inspectors measured everything. The size of the buds, the drying times, even the color of the workers' fingernails. They said it was for quality control, Hassan mutters, but maybe they just wanted to count our breaths. A quirky tidbit follows. Apparently, early 20th century Zanzibar introduced spice fines, small penalties for farmers whose clothes didn't meet export standards. Some locals began secretly sprinkling their drying racks with seawater to darken the buds, tricking the inspectors. "The sea helps us, even when it shouldn't," Hassan chuckles. You walk with him to a shed where workers are sorting the day's harvest. The sound is rhythmic, buds sifting through woven trays, soft as rain on canvas. A young woman sings as she works, her voice threading through the scent like silk. The song is about a fisherman who falls in love with a spice seller, but every verse ends with her refusing him until he learns to smell the difference between clove and cinnamon. You grin. "Did he ever learn?" she says, without looking up. "No, but that's why the sea keeps taking him back." There's mischief in her tone, and it lingers in the air as you step outside. Beyond the plantation, a dirt road winds toward town, where the railway line glimmers faintly in the distance, a narrow gauge that connects the docks to the inland estates. You hitch a ride on a rickety flatbed cart pulled by a small steam engine that hisses like a tired snake. The driver, wearing a bowler hat far too fancy for his job, claims the train was a gift from the Queen, or maybe her cousin. He can't remember which. He tells you the line was built not for people, but for spice. Every week, it hauls tons of dried cloves down to the port, where British merchants weigh and ship them to India, Arabia, and beyond. You'd think the cloves were royalty, always first class. As the train chugs along, you see glimpses of the island's changing face. New schools, colonial offices, and even a small cinema showing black and white newsreels. The posters outside promise the wonders of empire. You wonder if Zanzibar ever auditioned for the role. At the station, you hop off and wander through a market alive with sound and color. Women in bright kangas sell cardamom, tamarind, and dried ginger. Men shout prices over piles of bananas and yams. A group of children are making a game of sniffing different spices and guessing them blindfolded. One guesses nutmeg wrong 3 times, then proudly declares, "It smells like my uncle's shoes." Everyone laughs, including you. The island may be colonized, but its humor remains untouchable. You stop at a stall selling perfume oils. The vendor, an Indian trader named Patel, insists you try something new, a blend of clove, rose, and sandalwood. He calls Zanzibar #1. He claims it can make anyone fall in love within 3 heartbeats. You joke, "Then why are you still single?" He sighs dramatically, "Because I'm immune. Too much inventory." You buy a small vial anyway. The scent is decadent, dizzying, a love letter bottled in amber. You tuck it into your pocket, unsure if it's charm or camouflage. As dusk falls, you find yourself back by the ocean. The monsoon clouds are gathering again, dark and deliberate.
The smell of rain mingles with clove smoke from distant drying sheds. You think about everything the island has endured, sultans, slaves, empires, and economies, and still it stands fragrant. You sit on a log watching dhows sway in the surf. Asha's spice necklaces glimmer faintly in your memory. You reach into your pocket and open the perfume vial. The scent unfurls, slow and sweet, and the wind catches it, sending it spinning toward the horizon. Somewhere out there, the future waits, ships faster than thought, borders redrawn, maps rewritten. But for now, here on this wet, breathing island, you're suspended between the pulse of what was and what's coming. And as the last raindrops fall, the air tastes like resilience, sharp, fragrant, unmistakably Zanzibar.
Morning breaks like poured honey, slow, golden, and almost too sweet for what's coming next. You wake to the sound of gramophones spinning love songs in Swahili and English, their scratchy charm echoing down narrow coral alleys. The island feels poised between centuries, half dream, half telegram. You step into the street. Cars are appearing now, odd beasts that snort and rattle past bicycles and barefoot children. One honks at a goat. The goat wins. You smirk. Progress may have engines, but Zanzibar still has opinions. The 1920s are here. Jazz hums from verandas. The Sultan's court throws elaborate tea parties under chandeliers, and cloves, those faithful little buds, still lie drying on mats by the shore. But you can sense the shift. The world's center of gravity has moved. Steamships bring not just cargo, but ideas, nationalism, modern education, whispers of self-rule. You stop by the docks, where a British officer and a young Zanzibari clerk are arguing over paperwork. Regulation 42B, subsection 4, the officer says stiffly. The clerk sighs, muttering in Swahili. Even their sentences have subclauses. You chuckle quietly. Bureaucracy has replaced conquest, and somehow it's worse for the imagination. Historians still argue whether this was the era when Zanzibar's independent spirit began to simmer, or merely when colonial fatigue started to taste bitter. Either way, the island's pulse is changing. You wander toward the Forodani Gardens, where evening markets will soon blaze with kerosene lamps and skewers of octopus sizzling over charcoal. A boy selling coconuts stops you, chops one open with theatrical flair, and says, "For tourists, I charge extra, but you smell like someone who belongs." You take a sip. It's cold, sweet, forgiving. The smell of cloves lingers even here, ghosting from the merchant's hands. You follow it toward a small bookshop tucked between two mosques. Inside, ceiling fans swirl lazily, and the scent of old paper competes with sandalwood. The owner, an elderly woman with silver hair tied in a bun, introduces herself as B. Mariam. She tells her grandfather once worked as a scribe for the Sultan's court. She says he copied letters by hand and sealed them with wax that smelled of cinnamon. She leans closer. Now they type everything. No scent left. You smile, and she hands you a small book wrapped in brown paper. She says, "It's about our spices, not how to grow them, how they remember us." The title, handwritten on the cover, reads, "Mafuta ya Roho," the oils of the soul. You flip through it. The first line reads, "Every clove that falls to the ground dreams of returning as a story." You close the book and decide to buy it. Outside, the sun sinks and the city glows like embers. Men in long kanzu stroll along the seafront, discussing politics in hushed tones. You overhear phrases like Indian independence, Arab nationalism, and Swahili pride. Even the waves seem to murmur, restless. At the Africa House Hotel, a relic of colonial grandeur, you find a spot on the terrace. From here, the whole harbor stretches before you, dhows, ferries, and a new radio tower blinking on the horizon. A British couple nearby debates whether to stay another season. The husband says, "Zanzibar's losing its charm." The wife replies, "Maybe it's just finding its voice." You silently toast her with your drink. Down below, street musicians gather. One plays the oud, another taps a drum, and soon a small crowd forms. The rhythm is irresistible. Arabic cadence meeting African heartbeat wrapped in the salt of the sea. You join in clapping, laughing when someone calls out for you to dance. You try, badly. They cheer anyway. Then, in a moment of unexpected tenderness, the oud player sings a verse about cloves. They burn to release their sweetness, just like we do when love is gone. The crowd sighs. Someone jokes, "That's why my wife hides the cloves." Laughter rolls through the night, light and healing. But beyond the music, whispers of tension are growing louder. Economic depression hits the global markets, and Zanzibar feels the sting. Clove prices collapse. Farmers can't pay rent. Young men leave for mainland jobs. You walk through the plantations again and find the drying sheds emptier, the air less fragrant. Hassan's grandson, now running the estate, tells you, "We still dry them, but we can't afford to smile anymore." He points to a clove tree stripped bare. "When the buds fall early, we say the island is crying." You pick up a clove and twirl it in your fingers. It's light, dry, almost hollow. The scent is faint but stubborn, a memory refusing to die. On your way back, a fisherman waves you over. His boat, patched and sun-bleached, rocks gently on the tide. He offers you a seat and lights a kerosene lamp, its glow trembling on the water. "My grandfather carried slaves," he says quietly. "My father carried spices. Me, I carry stories. Lighter cargo." He chuckles, then adds, "But stories don't pay taxes." The lamp flickers as wind brush past. You ask him if he ever thinks about leaving. He shakes his head. "The sea won't let me. It keeps whispering, 'Not yet, not yet.'" As the night deepens, the rain begins again. Soft at first, then relentless. You and the fisherman sit in silence, watching the surface ripple. When the downpour ends, the world smells new again. Fresh, alive. You think of B. Mariam's book, the one about spices remembering their people, and realize she was right. The cloves still know. The island still breathes. Tomorrow there will be more ships, more politics, more paperwork, but tonight belongs to scent and salt and story. You breathe deeply, filling your lungs with air that carries centuries. Clove, seaweed, rain. Zanzibar. It's everything you can't hold, and everything you can never forget.
By now, you can almost smell time itself, thick, metallic, and slightly sweet. It's the mid-20th century, and the island hums with something electric, invisible, impatient. Radios crackle in Swahili and Arabic, carrying not just music but messages. Change is coming, and it smells like wet soil before a storm. You wake to a sky the color of copper.
Down in the harbor, ships from India, Oman, and Britain lie side by side, their flags flapping like restless tongues. The air tastes of clothes, diesel, and unspoken politics. Zanzibar is restless, and so are you. In the market, voices overlap, merchants haggling, school children reciting lessons, a preacher shouting about destiny. You catch a word here and there, uhuru, freedom. It rolls through the air like the smell of roasted corn, irresistible and inevitable. A young man approaches you, selling newspapers. The headline reads, "Zanzibar, the jewel of the Indian Ocean, demands its future." You hand him a coin. He grins. "Keep the change. You'll need luck more than I do." Then he disappears into the crowd, swallowed by color and chaos. You wander toward the Sultan's palace again, now faded but still majestic, its walls bearing the weariness of history. The guards look younger than the rifles they hold. Inside, an aide tells you that Sultan Jamshid has been under increasing pressure from nationalist parties. The British want a graceful exit, he says. The locals want an honest one. Historians still argue whether the British genuinely intended to prepare Zanzibar for self-governance or simply wanted to tidy up their empire before the world stopped applauding. But the tension here is unmistakable. Like the scent of cloves just before harvest, sharp and expectant. You cross paths again with Asha. Older now, lines on her face tracing years of wind and laughter. Her spice stall still stands, though her hands move slower. "People talk too much these days," she says, arranging cinnamon sticks. "They forget to listen to the smell." You ask what she means. She says, "When a storm comes, you can smell it first. The cloves tighten, the air changes. But now everyone listens to radios instead." You smile sadly. "The radios are loud." "So is history," she replies. You buy a small pouch of mixed spices, clove, nutmeg, cardamom. "A blend for new beginnings," she says with a wink. The next day, January 12, 1964, dawns red. Literally red. The sun climbs over the sea like a warning flare. You wake to shouting, then gunfire, then silence, thick enough to choke on. The Zanzibar Revolution has begun. You move carefully through the streets, ducking under balconies, hearing the roar of crowds near the palace. People wave flags, some jubilant, some fearful. You see graffiti scrawled on a wall. The scent of freedom is not always sweet. You think about that for a long moment. By noon, the old government falls, the Sultan flees into exile. The People's Republic of Zanzibar is declared. The crowd surges, chanting, crying, laughing. Someone sprays perfume into the air as if to sanctify the chaos. Later, when calm finally returns, the scent of cloves drifts again, but this time it smells different, bitterer somehow, mixed with smoke and uncertainty. A young revolutionary stands beside you, holding a flag still damp from the rain. He looks barely 20. "We're free," he says, breathless. "Really free." You look at him. "And what will you do with freedom?" He blinks, then smiles weakly. "Well, grow more cloves, I guess." You both laugh, because the alternative is crying. Quirky fact: a few weeks after the revolution, Zanzibar merged with mainland Tanganyika to form a new country, Tanzania. The name itself, a blend of both, sounds like a spice mix. History loves recipes. Still, the transition is uneasy. Power shifts, promises are rewritten, some plantations are nationalized, some abandoned. You walk through fields where clove trees grow wild, untended, their scent fading into weeds. A former overseer, now turned farmer, tells you the trees don't care who owns them, but they miss being touched. He rubs the bark of one trunk gently, like greeting an old friend. In town, the architecture begins to change. Concrete replaces coral. Old carved doors are painted over with slogans about progress. The new port cranes rise, awkward and immense, like steel giraffes peering over the horizon. You find B. Mariam's bookshop boarded up. Someone tells you she left for Mombasa years ago. Too much noise here, they say. You imagine her surrounded by books and incense somewhere quieter, still believing that spices remember. At sunset, you stand by the sea. The scent of the island rises with the tide. Salt, clove, exhaust, and something unnameable. You realize that the story of Zanzibar has always been about balance, sweetness and sorrow, trade and theft, perfume and pain. Asha passes by, closing her stall for the night. She sees you watching the horizon. "You'll leave soon," she says softly. You nod. "Maybe." "Then take this," she says, handing you one last necklace of cloves, so the island can follow you. You slip it around your neck. The scent fills the space between words. "Do you think it's over?" you ask. She smiles. "Nothing ever ends here. It just dries in the sun, and someday someone grinds it fresh again." The tide rises higher, erasing footprints along the shore. You stand there, letting the surf soak your ankles. Behind you, the calls to prayer begin, layered like harmony. Arabic notes, African rhythm, one sky. You look up. The first stars blink awake. The air, impossibly, still smells of cloves. It's not the same sweetness you first met. It's heavier, deeper, alive with every story told and untold. You whisper to no one in particular, "You still smell like forever." And the wind, warm and patient, answers in kind, carrying the fragrance inland where the spice trees wait to bloom again.
The morning is soft, almost lazy, as if the island itself is catching its breath. You wander down familiar lanes in Stone Town where coral walls glow gold and burnt sienna in the first light. Shops open gradually. Merchants sweep dust from thresholds, greeting you with nods, their voices low and melodic. The scent of cloves, nutmeg, and cardamom drifts lazily through the alleys, thick and comforting. You pause near a small cafe tucked into a corner, the aroma of strong coffee mingling with sweet cardamom. A woman smiles as she serves you a cup. "For the traveler," she says, "it helps the memory." You sip. The bitter warmth spreads across your tongue, anchoring you in the present while recalling everything that came before. The sultans, the revolutions, the rains, the laughter. You walk toward the harbor, where dhows rock gently in the tide. Their sails flap lazily, soft white against the rising sun. The fishermen nod to you, familiar now, their hands calloused but gentle. The ocean glimmers, holding reflections of the sky and the centuries it has witnessed. Every wave seems to hum a lullaby of the past, the scent of cloves carried in its mist, the memory of labor, joy, and the countless hands that shaped this island. You wander into a quiet alley where the carved wooden doors stand unpolished, weathered, but proud. Each brass stud, each intricate pattern seems to whisper secrets you weren't meant to hear, yet somehow do. There is humor here still, the subtle, quiet defiance of a city that has survived empires, revolutions, and the shifting tides of trade. You smile, remembering the old joke about cloves and heartbreak, about sea-scented spice, about the youth playing games with eyes shut and noses full of aroma. You climb a small staircase leading to a terrace overlooking the gardens below. The air is thick with greenery and the sharp, lingering sweetness of cloves. You inhale slowly. The scent wraps around you, a tangible reminder of resilience, continuity, and the quiet persistence of life. You think of Asha, of Hassan, of B. Mariam and the children who ran through streets with cinnamon sticks like trophies. Their stories, now yours, mingle with the island's own. A gentle wind drifts in from the sea, carrying with it both memory and promise. You realize that Zanzibar is less about its rulers, its markets, or even its trade, than about the essence that survives through it all. The lingering scent of cloves, the whispers of history, the pulse of lives intertwined. Even as streets modernize and boats change, the fragrance persists, a living thread connecting every epoch, every soul. Quirky yet true, even in the 21st century, some locals swear you can identify the mood of the city by how the cloves smell in the morning. A light, almost citrusy aroma signals laughter. A stronger, woodier scent signals reflection. And after heavy rains, they say, the cloves carry secrets too intimate to share aloud. As the sun climbs higher, you sit quietly, letting the warmth of the day settle into your bones. You realize the island is not static. It breathes, shifts, and sings, but never forgets. The spices, more than anything else, anchor its memory. They carry the sweetness and bitterness, the triumphs and tragedies, the ordinary and extraordinary of Zanzibar. You rise, walking slowly toward the shore. The dhows sway, the call to prayer rises, and somewhere, faint and teasing, a stray cat rubs against a corner wall, indifferent yet knowing. The clove-scented air lingers, a soft reminder that every story, every step, every breath you have taken here is part of a larger, unending narrative. And so, standing there, toes in the sand, watching the horizon bleed gold into blue, you finally understand. The spices that built Zanzibar are more than trade goods. They are memory, resilience, and life itself. And as the breeze carries that fragrant truth inland, you carry it too, a story to take beyond the waves, beyond time, beyond the very island itself.
The sun now rests high over the ocean, pouring warmth into every corner of the island. You sit on the sand, letting the gentle tide lap at your ankles. The waves sigh rhythmically, as if reciting centuries of whispered stories, carrying the scent of cloves, salt, and rain in their breath. The air feels thicker here, not heavy, but comforting, as if time itself has slowed to honor the island's enduring pulse. You close your eyes and let the memories of your journey settle. The laughter of children chasing cinnamon sticks, the solemn silence of the old slave market, the vibrant chaos of the marketplace, the quiet resilience of Asha and Hassan. They all blend into a single, fragrant tapestry. Every corner, every alley, every tree seems to hum with life and history. And yet, there is a softness now, a lull in the rhythm that allows you to simply breathe and exist within it. The breeze carries a gentle reminder. Zanzibar has survived because it remembers. The spices, cloves, nutmeg, cardamom, do more than scent the air. They hold memory, joy, sorrow, resilience, and triumph. They are the invisible thread weaving the past into the present, the mundane into the extraordinary. You feel it curling around you, warm and persistent, a living presence that both grounds and elevates. Slowly, the light softens. Shadows lengthen over coral walls and dhows. The hum of the city fades into the whisper of the waves, the distant call to prayer, the faint rustle of palm fronds.
You feel a quiet reassurance in this, a gentle closure to your wanderings. The island exhales, and so do you, fully, deeply, in tune with the rhythm of its life. And as your eyes drift closed, the lingering scent of cloves remains, a soft, enduring promise of memory, continuity, and the subtle magic that makes Zanzibar forever impossibly alive.